You know that feeling, right? When someone you really care about is struggling, truly in pain, maybe dealing with something incredibly difficult like, I don't know, addiction, deep depression, or just making choices that are clearly hurting them,
Hmm.
your most basic instinct is just jump in, fix it, make it stop now. It is
Yeah,
incredibly hard to just stand there and watch someone you love suffer.
absolutely. And there's that voice that just screams, if I don't step in, aren't I just abandoning them? Aren't I letting them fall apart, letting them hit some kind of, terrible rock bottom?
Yeah, it feels like the most caring thing to do is rush to their rescue.
Definitely.
That instinct is so powerful, and the source material we've been diving into goes right after that feeling, challenging it in a really fundamental way.
It
It
does.
makes this critical distinction right up front, which I think is key.
Yes, it's vital to understand the difference between a true immediate emergency, like someone being in physical danger, maybe driving drunk, or an imminent threat where intervention is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable for safety, that's one thing.
Right, you stop that immediate crisis. But the sources, they shift the focus to the deeper, more chronic struggles, the underlying pain, the destructive behaviors, the anxieties, the financial spirals, issues that are often hidden, built up over time, and tied to internal stuff like addiction, long-term depression, or, crippling anxiety.
And this is where the counterintuitive idea comes in.
Yeah.
The material suggests that our deeply ingrained desire to rescue someone from these kinds of deeper struggles, while yet born out of love, can actually become the very thing that prevents them from finding their own path, their own strength and healing.
Almost like the more you try to lift them out, the deeper they sink because they aren't using their own muscles. It's pretty starkly put in the title of the chapter we're pulling from. The more you rescue, the more they sink.
Precisely. We've been digging into excerpts from a book chapter exploring this perspective, weaving in insights from, well, fascinating work like Dr. Robert Waldinger's from the Harvard study of adult development, the longest study on human happiness,
Oh.
and Dr. Luana Marquez, a clinical psychologist from Harvard Medical School who studies anxiety and avoidance. Our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack these ideas, see what the actual insights are, and understand what this perspective means for how we actually support people we care about when they're hurting.
Okay, so let's get into it. One of the first things this material points out, which feels very real, is how hidden struggle often is. People wrestling with deep issues often carry immense shame, they're in denial, and they feel like, well, like they're a burden to others.
And because of that internal landscape, they are incredibly good at hiding the true depth of what they're going through. You might not realize how serious things are until they've reached a crisis point, maybe even when you feel like, oh man, I've missed the window to help.
Which leads to maybe the most challenging idea in this whole perspective, and the sources don't pull any punches here. They state very clearly that people only genuinely heal, get sober, face their issues, or embark on what's called the work when they are ready.
And crucially, they have to want to do it for themselves. This hit me hard. No matter how much you love someone, how much you believe they could be better, you simply cannot want their healing, their recovery, their change more than they do. It just doesn't work.
So if you're standing there wanting it for them more than they want it for themselves, what happens to your own reaction? The sources talk about judgment here.
Right. It points out that your opinions about what they should be doing, while perhaps valid from your perspective, often land on the person struggling as judgment or pressure. And pressure usually just creates resistance.
Instead of getting them to change, it can push them further away.
Exactly. The material suggests that if you have judgment or frustration, that needs an outlet elsewhere, maybe talking to your own therapist, a trusted friend, a support group. But what the person who is struggling needs from you is acceptance.
Not acceptance of the behavior necessarily, but
No, acceptance of where they are in their journey, even if it's not where you want them to be.
hmm. This really sharpens the core distinction this material makes. Rescuing versus supporting. They're framed as fundamentally different. And enabling, which often masquerades as love or support, is explicitly called out as being neither.
Yeah, enabling is described as any action that justifies, excuses, or supports the problematic behavior itself, often done with the best intentions because you think you're softening the blow or making things easier.
Like giving money to an adult child who isn't working to pay their bills when they haven't, taken steps towards employment.
Precisely. Or covering for someone's actions, making excuses for explosive anger, or just deliberately ignoring obvious problems because confronting them feels too difficult or scary. The sources are really firm here. Enabling doesn't lead to independence or healing.
It hinders it. It actually prolongs the suffering theirs, and often yours right alongside them.
Right. You think you're putting a cushion under their fall, but you might be just making the pit deeper and softer so they don't feel the need to climb out. A powerful concept here is the necessity of natural consequences.
This is where it gets really tough, isn't it? The idea that adults need to actually face and feel the consequences of their actions.
The sources present this as not just important, but a necessary step towards healing and getting better. They double down on that point we made earlier. Adults only make genuine progress when they are ready and willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And the person who is watching and trying to help is almost always going to be ready for that to happen long before the person struggling is.
So if rescuing isn't it and enabling is actively harmful, what does true support look like in this framework?
Well, it means giving the person the space and offering the resources or tools maybe, but allowing them to do the work themselves. The sources use a great analogy. Think of healing or recovery as a game the person has to play. Support is like you throwing them the ball.
Okay.
You can keep tossing it gently, but they have to decide to catch it and run with it.
And enabling is?
Enabling is you getting frustrated that they aren't catching it, running onto the field, grabbing the ball yourself, and running it down the field for them every single time.
Ah.
And the tough part of this perspective is that you have to accept they might not be ready to catch the ball. And the shift comes back to you. Let me stop running the ball for them. Let me stop making excuses for their behavior. Let me accept where they are and just be ready to toss the ball when they decide to play.
That shift feels like a major change in mindset, and the material also points out a significant distinction based on age, which makes sense from a developmental perspective, right?
Absolutely. When you're dealing with a child or a young adult, especially under the age of 25, because as the sources note, brain maturation, particularly in areas related to decision-making and consequence evaluation, isn't complete until around then you are responsible for their emotional, financial, and physical support. You're actively involved in steering their path and their healing.
They still need significant guidance and direct intervention sometimes.
Yes, but the sources draw a line roughly around age 25. For adults over that age, the dynamic fundamentally changes. They're presented as responsible for their own healing, capable of it, and needing to choose it.
Regardless of age, though, someone in the depths of a struggle, whether it's severe depression, active addiction, or processing a major tragedy, is often described as being in pure survival mode.
Fight, flight, or freeze.
Right. Their capacity for complex problem solving or long-term thinking is significantly impaired. You can absolutely offer comfort in that moment, a hug, just sitting with them, listening without trying to fix it immediately. But you can't lift them out of a chronic survival or stressed state for them. That deep work of emotional regulation, processing trauma, or changing fundamental behaviors is something they have to undertake.
This connects back to human nature, doesn't it? The sources touch on what people like Dr. Lorana Marquez discuss our wiring to seek ease and avoid pain.
Exactly. Avoidance is a very common coping mechanism. When you're struggling or confronted with something difficult, the immediate, easier path is often to avoid it, to numb it, to run from it. Dr. Marquez highlights that this feels better in the moment, but it inevitably makes things worse over time.
So sometimes, counterintuitively, the pain itself is necessary. It's a catalyst. That's a powerful idea presented. The sources include a quote from an addiction specialist that is incredibly sharp. No one gets sober until being drunk is more painful than facing the thing you are running from.
Wow, that perfectly captures it.
And the material argues this principle applies beyond addiction to other deep struggles, eating disorders, financial ruin, deep anxiety. The difficulty, the struggle itself, is positioned as a critical, perhaps even necessary part of the human experience.
It's the friction that can spark the desire for change because, as the sources emphasize, healing is fundamentally a choice they have to make, and it requires turning towards what you're running from, not away.
Right. And Dr. Robert Waldinger's long-term research from the Harvard study reinforces this from a different angle. He advises, let people learn from life. Don't shield them from the consequences.
Like losing a job because you weren't performing or losing a relationship because of your behavior, things like that.
Exactly. Or even facing less severe things, like the discomfort of homesickness or the anxiety of a new challenge. Waldinger's perspective is that you help people build resilience and capability, not by removing the challenges, but by allowing them to meet those challenges.
The material brings this to life with a really relatable, though painful, personal story. The example of the daughter's middle school anxiety about sleeping alone.
This really highlights the difference between rescuing and supporting. The parent's instinct, completely understandable, was to alleviate the child's immediate distress by letting her sleep on the floor in their room.
Which felt like support in the moment, of course.
It did. It stopped the tears that night. But the sources point out that this act, which went on for 6 months every single night, was enabling the avoidance. The parents' actions, despite their loving intention, were sending a message. I believe you are not strong enough to tolerate this fear, so I will remove the situation that causes it.
And the consequence.
The anxiety actually worsened over the next few years because the daughter never had the chance to learn that she could tolerate the discomfort, that the fear wouldn't actually harm her, and that she had the internal resources to manage it. She wasn't allowed to discover her own capability.
Wow. This story powerfully illustrates a core principle. You absolutely cannot control another person's feelings or their ultimate choices. You can't make someone not feel anxious or decide to get sober. But what you can control is your own response to their struggle.
This is where that let me framework becomes practical. It shifts the focus from trying to control them to controlling yourself and your reactions. Let me acknowledge and validate their feelings. Let me separate my own anxiety or frustration from their experience. Let me offer comfort and presence.
But then let me support them in doing the difficult thing. Let me stop enabling behaviors that are harmful in the long run. Let me stop lying to myself or others about the reality of the situation. Let me accept that they might not be ready to change right now and commit to being ready to offer genuine support when they are.
The anxiety story provides a raw example of what that hard support looks like. After realizing the enabling that was happening, the parent, night after painful night, had to get up, take the daughter by the hand, and walk her back to her own room.
And stay there. Or
No, the sources describe walking her back, putting her back in her bed, and then standing outside her door, listening to her cry and plead. It describes how awful that felt, feeling like a monster, wanting to call the therapist and fire them because it was so agonizing to witness.
that sounds incredibly difficult, gut-wrenching.
It is. But that, the material suggests, is what true support can look like when someone is facing a fear they need to overcome, standing by their side, offering presence and belief while they experience the discomfort and do the difficult thing themselves. It took days, the story says, before the daughter finally stayed in her room without pleading.
Because your actions communicate more loudly than your words ever can. When you rush in and rescue, you might unintentionally be telling them, I don't believe you have the strength to handle this yourself.
But when you hold steady, offer support, and allow them to face the difficulty, like standing outside that door, you are communicating with your behavior. I see how hard this is, but I believe in you. I know you are capable of getting through this, and I will be right here as you do it.
It's clear why this approach is so hard, as the sources acknowledge. Supporting someone this way is emotionally draining. It takes immense patience. It's frustrating because change is slow, or sometimes doesn't happen when you want it to. Enabling, on the other hand, just giving the money, ignoring the problem, letting them quit when it gets hard, that's often the easier, faster path in the short term.
But the outcomes are worlds apart. If you constantly rescue, they learn helplessness and dependence. They learn to wait for you to solve it. If they are supported while facing difficulty, they learn something invaluable. Their own capability, their own resilience, their own strength. They learn they can navigate pain and come out the other side.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the core takeaway, as challenging as it is that true support isn't about swooping in and rescuing someone from their problems. It's about having faith in their own ability to confront those problems and standing steadfastly by their side, offering presence, belief, and appropriate resources while they do the necessary, often painful work of healing and growth.
And enabling, despite its roots in love and good intentions, often ironically perpetuates suffering and blocks that crucial path of self-discovery and capability. It demands incredible emotional resilience and patience from the person offering the support.
Given how deeply that instinct to rescue is wired within us when we see someone we care about hurting, here's something to ponder as you think about this. What is one small area in your life, maybe with a family member, a friend, or even a colleague, where you might currently be stepping in, thinking you're helping or softening the blow, but could it potentially be enabling? And how might shifting your response towards true support and allowing them to face the discomfort actually empower them and perhaps even empower you in the process to discover unexpected strength?